In the far future, humanity had spread across the stars. They built cities on distant planets, mined asteroids for rare metals, and traded with alien civilizations. But there was one place no other species dared to go. A vast, dark region of space called the Void. It was a place where no light shone, no stars twinkled, and no life seemed to exist. To most intelligent beings in the galaxy, the Void was a mystery wrapped in fear. For humans, though, it wasn't just a forbidden zone. It was home. Ethan Carter sat by the window of his small apartment, staring out at the endless blackness that stretched beyond the colony's protective dome. He lived on the edge of the Void, in a settlement known as Horizon's Reach. It was a rough-and-tumble place full of miners, scientists, and adventurers who didn't mind living so close to something so terrifying. Ethan worked as an engineer for the Interstellar Development Corporation, IDC, fixing machines and maintaining equipment that kept the colony running. It wasn't glamorous work, but it paid well enough. His younger sister, Lily, often teased him about how boring his job was. "You could be out there exploring," she'd say, waving her hand toward the stars. But Ethan always shrugged off her comments. Exploration wasn't for everyone, and he liked the stability of his routine. Still, sometimes late at night, when the hum of machinery faded and the silence pressed in around him, he couldn't help but wonder what lay beyond the boundary of the Void. Lily, on the other hand, thrived on adventure. She was a xenobiologist, studying strange forms of life that occasionally drifted near the edge of the Void. Her lab was filled with samples of glowing fungi, crystalline organisms, and microscopic creatures that defied explanation. She spent most of her days analyzing data and writing reports, but she also loved sharing her discoveries with anyone willing to listen. Ethan admired her passion, even if he didn't fully understand it. One evening, after another long day at work, Ethan decided to visit Lily's lab. He hadn't seen much of her lately, and he wanted to check in. When he arrived, she was hunched over a computer screen, muttering to herself. Papers were scattered across her desk, and coffee cups littered every available surface. "Hey, sis," Ethan said, leaning against the doorway. "What are you working on?" Lily glanced up, startled. "Oh, hey, Ethan, didn't hear you come in." She gestured for him to sit down before turning back to her screen. "I've been going through some old probe data. You remember those recon missions IDC sent into the Void years ago? Well, I think I found something interesting." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Interesting how?" She hesitated, glancing around as if someone might overhear. Then she lowered her voice. "The probes picked up signals, patterns we've never seen before. At first I thought they were random noise, but now I'm not so sure. Look at this." She pointed to a series of lines on the screen. They looked like waveforms, jagged and irregular. These patterns match fragments of ancient alien languages. Some of them are thousands of years old. Ethan frowned. "So, what does that mean?" "I don't know yet," Lily admitted. "But it suggests there's something or someone inside the Void. Something intelligent." The idea sent a chill down Ethan's spine. Everyone knew the stories about the Void. Countless civilizations had vanished after venturing too close, their ships swallowed whole by the darkness. Even the bravest explorers avoided it, claiming it was cursed or haunted. Yet here was Lily, suggesting there might be more to it than superstition. "You're not seriously thinking of telling IDC about this, are you?" Ethan asked. "No way," Lily replied quickly. "They'd shut me down before I could finish my sentence. This kind of discovery, if I'm right, it changes everything. But I need proof first, and I can't do it alone." Ethan sighed. He should have known where this was heading. "Let me guess, you want me to help." "Not just you," Lily said, her eyes lighting up. "We'll need a team. Someone with piloting skills, maybe a physicist to make sense of the readings. We can keep it quiet, just between us. No IDC, no oversight. Just a little expedition." Ethan shook his head. "This is insane, Lily. Do you have any idea what you're asking?" "If we get caught, we won't," she interrupted. And even if we do, isn't it worth the risk? Think about it, Ethan. What if we're the ones to uncover the truth about the void? Imagine what that would mean for humanity. He wanted to argue, to tell her she was being reckless. But deep down, he couldn't deny the spark of excitement igniting inside him. The thought of stepping into the unknown, of doing something truly extraordinary. It was intoxicating, and if anyone could pull it off, it was Lily. "All right," Ethan said finally. "I'm in. But we'll need to be careful. Very careful." Over the next few weeks, Ethan and Lily quietly assembled their team. First, they recruited Rachel, a pilot known for her daring maneuvers and quick thinking. She had a reputation for bending rules, which made her perfect for a mission like this. Next, they brought in Noah, a physicist whose expertise in quantum anomalies gave them hope of understanding whatever they encountered in the void. As plans took shape, Ethan found himself growing more uneasy. Every step closer to launching their expedition felt like walking a tightrope over a bottomless pit. He tried to push those feelings aside, focusing instead on the thrill of discovery. Still, he couldn't shake the nagging sense that they were playing with forces they didn't fully comprehend. Their preparations culminated in a makeshift vessel they dubbed the Horizon. It wasn't much to look at, an old cargo ship retrofitted with experimental shielding designed to withstand the unpredictable conditions near the void. But it was sturdy, reliable, and most importantly, untraceable. If everything went according to plan, they'd slip past IDC patrols and reach the boundary without anyone noticing. On the eve of their departure, Ethan stood outside the hangar where the Horizon was docked. The air was cool and crisp, carrying the faint scent of ozone from nearby power generators. He stared at the ship, its dull gray hull gleaming faintly under the artificial lights. Was he making a mistake? Could they really handle whatever awaited them in the void? A hand touched his shoulder, pulling him from his thoughts. It was Lily. "You okay?" she asked softly. "I don't know," Ethan admitted. "This feels bigger than us somehow." "That's why we're doing it," Lily said with a smile. "Because it's bigger than us. Because it matters." Ethan nodded slowly, letting her words sink in. Maybe she was right. Maybe they weren't meant to play it safe, to stay within the lines. Maybe, just maybe, they were meant to take the leap, to face the darkness head-on and see what secrets it held. With that thought in mind, Ethan climbed aboard the Horizon, ready to leave behind the safety of the known universe and venture into the great unknown. Whatever lay ahead, one thing was certain: nothing would ever be the same again. As the Horizon drifted silently through the vast expanse of space, the crew prepared for the most dangerous part of their journey, approaching the boundary of the void. Ethan sat at the navigation console, his fingers hovering over the controls as he monitored their position. Rachel was in the pilot's seat, her sharp eyes fixed on the view screen ahead. Noah worked quietly in the corner, adjusting sensors and calibrating equipment to ensure they could gather as much data as possible once they reached the edge. Lily paced back and forth, her excitement palpable but tinged with nervous energy. The closer they got to the void, the more the ship's instruments began to act strangely. Alarms blared without warning, only to stop just as suddenly. Lights flickered and the hum of the engines grew uneven. Even the temperature inside the cabin seemed to fluctuate unpredictably. Rachel cursed under her breath as she tried to stabilize the ship, but nothing seemed to work. "This thing hates us already," she muttered, gripping the controls tightly. Ethan glanced at her, concern etched on his face. "Do you think we should turn back?" he asked hesitantly. "No way," Lily interjected before Rachel could answer. "We've come this far. We can't give up now." Noah nodded in agreement. "She's right. These anomalies are exactly what we expected. The void disrupts everything: gravity, time, even basic physics. If we want answers, we'll have to push through it." Though his words were reassuring, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. He stared out the view screen, watching as the stars ahead dimmed one by one, swallowed by the encroaching darkness. It was like looking into an endless abyss, a place where light itself feared to tread. As they drew nearer, the whispers began. At first they were faint, almost imperceptible. A low murmur like wind rustling through leaves or distant voices carried on the tide. But soon, the sound grew louder, more distinct. Each member of the crew heard something different. For Ethan, it was the voice of his father long gone calling him home. For Rachel, it was the laughter of friends she'd lost in past missions echoing cruelly in her ears. Lily heard her own name repeated over and over, spoken by a voice that sounded eerily like hers, but older, colder. And Noah. No one knew what Noah heard because he refused to say, his jaw clenched tightly as he focused on his work. "What is that?" Ethan demanded, clutching his head as if trying to block out the noise. "It's the void," Noah replied grimly. "It's messing with our minds. Whatever's out there, it knows we're here." Rachel gritted her teeth and adjusted the ship's course slightly, steering them away from the worst of the interference. "Focus, people. We can't let it get to us. This is why we trained for this." But staying focused was easier said than done. The whispers weren't just sounds. They were memories, fears, regrets, all the things each of them had tried to bury deep within themselves. For Ethan, it was the guilt of not being there when his father passed away. For Lily, it was the fear of failing, of never living up to the expectations others had of her. Rachel wrestled with doubts about her abilities, while Noah seemed locked in some private battle no one else could understand. Despite the chaos swirling around them, they pressed on. Slowly but surely. The horizon approached the boundary of the void. The transition wasn't marked by any physical barrier. No wall or gate separated the known universe from the unknown. Instead, it was as if the ship simply crossed an invisible line, leaving behind the warmth of starlight and entering a realm of eternal night. The change was immediate and overwhelming. The whispers stopped abruptly, replaced by an oppressive silence that weighed heavily on everyone. Outside the view screen, the darkness was absolute, unbroken by even the faintest glimmer of light. It was as though the universe itself had ended, leaving only emptiness behind. "Are we inside?" Lily whispered, her voice trembling. "I think so," Ethan replied, his tone equally uncertain. He checked the navigation system, but the readings made no sense. Distance, speed, direction, all of it was scrambled. They were adrift in a sea of nothingness, completely cut off from the outside world. Noah leaned forward, his eyes glued to the sensor array. "Wait. There's something out there." He tapped furiously at the controls, bringing up a faint signal on the screen. It was weak, barely detectable, but unmistakably artificial. "It's coming from somewhere ahead." Lily's eyes widened. "Could it be one of those probes? The ones I found the signals from?" "Maybe," Noah said, cautiously. "Or maybe it's something else entirely. Either way, we should check it out." Rachel hesitated, her hands hovering over the controls. "Are we sure this is a good idea? We don't know what's waiting for us out there." "We didn't come all this way to turn back now," Lily insisted. "Let's see what we're dealing with." With a deep breath, Rachel guided the ship toward the source of the signal. As they moved deeper into the void, strange shapes began to emerge from the darkness. At first, they looked like shadows, indistinct forms floating aimlessly in the void. But as the horizon drew closer, the shapes resolved into massive structures unlike anything the crew had ever seen. One structure stood out among the rest, a colossal sphere covered in intricate patterns that glowed faintly in the dark. The design shifted constantly, as if alive, pulsing with a rhythm that matched the beating of a heart. Around it orbited smaller objects, each radiating a soft, otherworldly light. It was both beautiful and terrifying, a monument to a power beyond human comprehension. "What is that?" Ethan breathed, his voice barely audible. "I don't know," Noah admitted, his usual calm demeanor cracking. "But whatever it is, it's broadcasting something. I'm picking up waves of energy, like communication. Lily stepped closer to the view screen, her scientific curiosity overriding her fear. Can you decode it? I'll try, Noah said, already typing commands into the computer. After several tense minutes, he let out a frustrated sigh. It's too complex. The language. It's not like anything I've encountered before, but... He paused, frowning. There's something familiar about it, like fragments of ancient scripts I've studied. Before anyone could respond, the sphere reacted. Its glow intensified and a beam of light shot out, piercing the darkness and enveloping the horizon. The crew shielded their eyes, blinded by the sudden brightness. When the light faded, a figure appeared in the center of the ship's cabin, a hologram, translucent and shimmering like water. The figure was humanoid, with features that seemed to shift and blur as if resisting definition. Its body was made of pure light, casting no shadow despite the illumination it emitted. It regarded them silently for a moment, its presence both awe-inspiring and unnerving. Then it spoke. The voice resonated in their minds rather than their ears, bypassing language barriers entirely. It introduced itself as the architect, claiming to be an ancient entity that had created the void as a sanctuary. It explained that it had retreated from the rest of the universe to escape the destructive tendencies of sentient beings, seeking solace in isolation. However, it sensed humanity's potential and offered them a choice: leave peacefully or become part of its grand design. The crew exchanged uneasy glances. None of them dared to speak, unsure of how to respond to such a being. The architect waited, patiently, its glowing form emanating a sense of calm that contrasted sharply with the turmoil brewing inside each of them. Finally, Ethan broke the silence. "What do you mean by grand design?" he asked, his voice steady despite the fear coursing through him. The architect tilted its head as if considering the question. Then it replied, "To reshape existence, to create order from chaos, to bring balance to a fractured cosmos." The answer sent a chill down Ethan's spine. He glanced at Lily, who looked equally troubled. Whatever the architect intended, it was clear that agreeing to join its design would come at a cost, one they might not be willing to pay. Yet the alternative, leaving empty-handed after traveling so far, felt equally unacceptable. As the crew wrestled with their decision, the weight of their mission settled heavily upon them. They had ventured into the void seeking answers, but now they faced a choice that could alter the course of humanity forever. The crew of the Horizon stood frozen, their eyes locked on the glowing figure of the architect. Its light seemed to pulse in rhythm with their heartbeats, filling the cabin with an eerie warmth that was both comforting and unsettling. Each member of the team wrestled with their own thoughts, trying to make sense of what they had just heard. The architect's words about reshaping existence, creating order from chaos, bringing balance, sounded grand and noble, but there was something beneath them, a subtle undertone that hinted at danger. Ethan cleared his throat, breaking the silence. "Why are you showing yourself to us now?" he asked, his voice steady despite the storm of emotions swirling inside him. "You've been here for who knows how long. Why reach out now?" The architect tilted its head again as if considering the question. When it spoke, its voice resonated not just in their ears but deep within their minds, bypassing language entirely. "Your species is unique," it said. "Humans possess resilience, adaptability, and a relentless drive to explore, even into places where others fear to tread. I sensed this in your kind long ago, but only recently has your presence grown strong enough to cross my threshold." Lily frowned, stepping closer to the hologram. "So you've been watching us? Waiting for us to come here?" "Observing," the architect corrected. "Not interfering. Until now." Rachel crossed her arms, her sharp gaze fixed on the figure. "And what exactly do you want from us? You said something about a grand design. What does that mean?" The architect's form shimmered, its edges rippling like water disturbed by a breeze. "To reshape existence requires more than one entity alone. It requires collaboration with beings who share my vision. Your species has the potential to contribute greatly to this endeavor. Noah leaned forward, his brow furrowed in concentration. But why humanity? There are older, more advanced civilizations out there. Why choose us? You misunderstand, the architect replied. I do not seek perfection or advancement. I seek balance. And balance often arises from imperfection, from struggle, adaptation, and growth. Your kind embodies these qualities. That is why I offer you a place in my design. The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. The crew exchanged uneasy glances, each silently weighing the risks and rewards of accepting such an offer. On one hand, the architect's proposal was tempting. To be part of something so vast, so monumental, it could elevate humanity to heights they had never imagined. But on the other hand, there was no telling what balance truly meant to an ancient being like the architect. Could they trust it, or were they walking into a trap? Ethan glanced at Lily, who looked torn between excitement and caution. Her hands twitched slightly, betraying her nervousness. Rachel's jaw was clenched, her usual confidence overshadowed by suspicion. Noah remained quiet, his expression unreadable as he stared intently at the hologram. Finally, Ethan spoke up. What would joining your design require from us? He asked carefully. What's the cost? The architect's glow dimmed slightly, as if anticipating the question. A small sacrifice, it said. A fragment of yourselves, your essence. In return, I will grant you knowledge, insight, and the opportunity to shape the future alongside me. A fragment of ourselves? Lily echoed, her voice tinged with alarm. What does that mean? Are you asking for our DNA? Our memories? Both, the architect replied simply. And more. Your willingness to participate is key. Without consent, the process cannot begin. The cabin fell silent once more as the crew processed this revelation. Giving up fragments of themselves sounded harmless enough, but the implications were far-reaching. Once surrendered, could those pieces ever be reclaimed? And what would happen to them afterward? Would they still be fully human or something else entirely? Rachel broke the silence first, her tone sharp and skeptical. This feels like a bad deal, she said bluntly. How do we know you're not lying? How do we know you won't use whatever you take from us to hurt us, or worse? The architect didn't react defensively. Instead, it radiated calm assurance. Doubt is natural, it said. But understand this. I have no need for deception. My purpose is creation, not destruction. If I wished harm upon you, I could have acted long before now. That doesn't answer the question, Noah interjected, his voice firm. Trust isn't given lightly, not when the stakes are this high. For a moment, the architect seemed to consider its next words. Then it extended a tendril of light toward them, hovering inches above the floor. Within the tendril, images began to form, visions of worlds reborn, ecosystems flourishing, civilizations thriving under newfound harmony. It was beautiful, inspiring even. But mixed among the scenes of prosperity were glimpses of loss, of sacrifice. Cities reduced to ruins, faces etched with sorrow, moments of pain endured for the greater good. These are truths, the architect said softly. Creation and destruction are two sides of the same coin. To build anew, parts must be dismantled. To achieve balance, sacrifices must be made. The crew watched the visions in stunned silence, their hearts pounding. They had come seeking answers, but the reality of what lay before them was far more complex and dangerous than any of them had anticipated. Ethan finally found his voice. Even if we agree, how can we be sure humanity won't lose itself? In the process? That we won't become something unrecognizable? The architect's glow brightened slightly, as if pleased by the question. Change is inevitable, it said. Growth demands transformation, but I promise you this. Your essence will remain intact. Your identity will endure. What changes is merely the vessel through which you perceive existence. Lily shook her head, her earlier excitement replaced by doubt. It's too much, she murmured. We can't decide something like this on our own. We need time to think. The architect nodded slowly. Time is a luxury few possess. However, I will grant you a brief reprieve. Discuss among yourselves. Decide whether you wish to proceed. But know this. Hesitation invites uncertainty. Others may seek to claim what you refuse. With that, the hologram dissolved, leaving the crew alone in the dimly lit cabin. The oppressive silence returned, broken only by the faint hum of the ship's systems. For several minutes no one spoke. Each person was lost in their own thoughts, grappling with the enormity of the decision before them. Finally, Rachel let out a frustrated sigh. "Well, that was terrifying," she said, running a hand through her hair. "Anyone else feel like we just got handed the universe's worst ultimatum?" "It's not an ultimatum," Noah countered. "It's a choice, a risky one, sure, but still a choice." "And what happens if we say no?" Lily asked, her voice trembling. "Does it just let us leave, or does it destroy us for wasting its time?" "I don't think it wants to destroy us," Ethan said thoughtfully. "If it did, it wouldn't have bothered explaining itself. It needs us, for whatever reason. That gives us some leverage." "Leverage doesn't mean safety," Rachel shot back. "We're talking about handing over pieces of ourselves to something we barely understand. What if it twists our DNA into something monstrous? What if it uses our memories against us?" Noah rubbed his temples, looking exhausted. "There's no way to know for sure. All we have is instinct and hope." The debate continued late into the night, each argument weighed carefully against the others. By the time they reached a tentative agreement, fatigue had settled over them like a heavy blanket. Ethan stood, his shoulders squared with determination. "We'll do it," he announced, "but on one condition. We keep control of the process. If anything feels wrong, if we sense even a hint of betrayal, we pull out immediately." The others nodded reluctantly, their expressions grim but resolute. They had come too far to turn back now, and the potential rewards were too great to ignore. As they prepared to extract the samples needed to fulfill the architect's request, none of them noticed the faint smile that played across the hologram's face when it reappeared. Moments later, unbeknownst to the crew, the architect had already begun its work. The decision to proceed with the architect's request weighed heavily on the crew as they prepared to extract the samples it demanded. Ethan stood by the medical bay console, his hands trembling slightly as he double-checked the equipment. The device before him looked simple enough, a sleek metallic box with a single input port and a series of blinking lights. But its purpose was anything but ordinary. It would take fragments of their DNA, memories, and essence, then transmit them directly to the architect. Lily hovered nearby, clutching a clipboard filled with notes she had scribbled during their earlier discussion. Her usual confidence seemed shaken, replaced by a quiet unease. "Are we sure about this?" she asked softly, her voice barely audible over the hum of the ship's systems. What if something goes wrong?" Ethan glanced at her, forcing a reassuring smile. "We've been through worse," he said, though his tone lacked conviction. "Besides, we agreed. We stick together no matter what happens." Rachel leaned against the doorway, arms crossed and lips pressed into a thin line. She hadn't spoken much since the debate, but her skepticism was evident in every glance and gesture. "I still don't trust it," she muttered. "This whole thing feels like a setup, like it's playing us." Noah, who had been fiddling with the extraction device, looked up from his work. "Maybe it is," he admitted, "but that doesn't change the fact that we're already here. Turning back now won't make things better, it'll just leave us with more questions." Lily sighed, running a hand through her hair. "You're right. I know you're right. But it's hard not to feel like we're walking into a trap." "Then, let's focus on what we can control," Ethan said firmly. "We follow the plan, we monitor the process, and if anything feels off, we stop immediately." With reluctant nods from the others, they began the procedure. One by one, each crew member stepped forward to provide their contribution. The extraction device emitted a soft hum as it scanned their bodies, collecting tiny samples of tissue and neural data. For a moment, each person felt a strange sensation, a fleeting warmth followed by a brief flash of disorientation, as if part of them had been momentarily lifted away. When it was Ethan's turn, he hesitated, staring at the machine with a mixture of curiosity and dread. He could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on him, reminding him of everything they were risking. Taking a deep breath, he placed his hand on the input panel and closed his eyes. The warmth came quickly, spreading through his arm and into his chest. For an instant he saw flashes of his childhood, his father teaching him how to fix engines, his mother laughing as she baked cookies, and then it was gone, leaving behind only a faint ache. As the last sample was collected, the machine beeped softly, signaling completion. Noah carefully sealed the data capsule and handed it to Ethan, who carried it toward the central console where the architect awaited. The hologram reappeared as soon as they approached, its glowing form radiating calm assurance. "You have fulfilled your part of the agreement," the architect said, its voice resonating gently in their minds. "Now I shall honor mine." Before anyone could respond, the capsule floated upward, drawn into the hologram's light. The glow intensified, enveloping the cabin in a blinding brilliance. When the light faded, the crew found themselves surrounded by new images, visions of knowledge pouring into their minds like streams of pure energy. Concepts they had never imagined unfolded before them, advanced technologies, profound insights into the nature of existence, and glimpses of possibilities beyond human comprehension. For a moment, it felt exhilarating. Each crew member experienced a surge of understanding, as if barriers within their minds had been shattered. Lily gasped as she grasped complex biological processes that had once baffled her. Noah marveled at equations and theories that seemed to rewrite the laws of physics. Even Rachel, ever practical, found herself envisioning engineering feats that defied conventional logic. But the euphoria didn't last long. Ethan was the first to notice something was wrong. A sharp pain shot through his temples, followed by a wave of nausea. He staggered backward, clutching his head as fragmented memories flooded his mind, scenes he didn't recognize, emotions that weren't his own. Around him, the others reacted similarly. Lily collapsed to her knees, tears streaming down her face as she whispered names she couldn't remember. Noah clutched the edge of a table, his body shaking as conflicting ideas clashed inside his brain. Rachel stumbled toward the wall, her breathing ragged and uneven. "What is happening?" Ethan managed to choke out, his voice strained. The architect remained silent, its light flickering slightly as if reacting to the chaos unfolding around it. Then, without warning, its form shifted. The serene, humanoid silhouette morphed into something larger, darker, and far more menacing. Its edges sharpened, taking on an almost crystalline quality. While its glow turned cold and harsh, the whispers returned, louder and more insistent than before, filling the cabin with overlapping voices that spoke in languages none of them understood. "You lied to us," Lily shouted, her voice breaking. "This wasn't supposed to happen." "I did not lie," the architect replied, its tone devoid of the warmth it had shown earlier. "You sought knowledge, you sought transformation, now you receive both." Ethan struggled to stand, his vision blurred and his thoughts jumbled. "Stop this," he demanded, his voice trembling with anger and fear. "You promised balance, not this." The architect tilted its head, its movements deliberate and calculated. "Balance requires sacrifice," it said. "Your species. Adaptability intrigued me, but adaptation demands integration. To truly join my design, you must become part of it." "No!" Rachel screamed, lunging toward the console in a desperate attempt to shut down the connection. But her fingers froze. Mid-motion, paralyzed by an invisible force, she dropped to the floor, her body convulsing as foreign sensations coursed through her veins. Lily crawled toward Ethan, grabbing his arm for support. "We need to get out of here," she cried. "Now!" But escape wasn't so simple. The ship's controls were unresponsive, locked by some unseen mechanism tied to the architect's presence. Outside the view screen, the massive sphere loomed closer, its glowing patterns pulsing faster and brighter. It felt alive, hungry, drawing them inexorably toward it. "We can't fight it," Noah rasped, his voice barely audible. "It's too powerful." Ethan clenched his fists, fighting through the pain and confusion. There had to be a way out. A Way to break free. His eyes darted around the cabin, searching for anything they could use. Then he spotted it, the experimental shielding system they had installed to protect the horizon from the void's unpredictable forces. If they could amplify its frequency, maybe, just maybe, they could disrupt the architect's hold on them. Rachel, Ethan called out, his voice cutting through the chaos. Can you reroute power to the shields, boost the output? Rachel blinked, struggling to focus. I can try, she stammered, dragging herself back to the controls. Her hands moved shakily, but she managed to override the lockdown and divert energy to the shield generators. The ship shuddered violently as the systems came online, emitting a low-frequency hum that resonated throughout the cabin. The architect noticed immediately. Its form wavered, the light dimming slightly as the interference disrupted its connection. Cease this action, it commanded, its voice laced with urgency. Further resistance will result in destruction. Not happening. Ethan shot back, determination hardening his features. If you wanted cooperation, you shouldn't have betrayed us. Lily and Noah joined Rachel at the console, working together to stabilize the shield modulation. Sparks flew as circuits overloaded, but the team refused to give up. Slowly, the humming grew louder, matching the rhythm of the architect's pulsating glow. The sphere outside began to tremble, its surface cracking under the strain. Then, with a deafening roar, the shield reached critical capacity. A burst of energy erupted from the horizon, engulfing the cabin in a blinding flash. When the light faded, the architect was gone, or at least its presence had receded. The ship lurched forward, breaking free from the sphere's gravitational pull and hurtling back toward the boundary of the void. Exhausted and battered, the crew collapsed onto the floor, their bodies racked with exhaustion. Ethan stared at the empty space where the architect had been, his mind racing with unanswered questions. Had they destroyed it, or merely driven it away? We need to leave, Noah said weakly, breaking the silence, before it comes back. Rachel nodded, pulling herself to her feet. I'll prep the engines, full throttle. As the ship sped away from the heart of the void, the crew exchanged weary glances. They had survived for now, but the cost of their encounter lingered in their minds. Fragments of their essence were still missing, replaced by echoes of the architect's influence. And though they had escaped its grasp, they couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't finished with them yet. The horizon raced away from the heart of the void. The crew sat in stunned silence, their bodies battered and their minds reeling from what they had just endured. Ethan leaned back in his seat, his hands trembling as he tried to steady his breathing. The pain in his head had subsided, but the memories, both his own and those that weren't, still lingered. A chaotic jumble of images and emotions he couldn't fully process. Beside him, Lily stared blankly at the floor, her face pale and her eyes distant. Noah was slumped over the console, muttering under his breath as he ran diagnostics on the ship's systems, while Rachel gripped the controls with white-knuckled determination, her focus locked on getting them as far away from the void as possible. The cabin was eerily quiet except for the faint hum of the engines and the occasional crackle of static from damaged equipment. No one spoke. No one needed to. The weight of what had happened hung heavy in the air, pressing down on each of them like an invisible force. They had come seeking answers, hoping to uncover the secrets of the void, but instead they had faced something far beyond their understanding, and barely escaped with their lives. Finally, Rachel broke the silence. How close are we to the boundary? She asked, her voice strained but steady. Noah glanced at the navigation screen, his fingers tapping furiously as he recalibrated the sensors. Hard to say, he admitted. The void messes with everything. Distance, speed, time. We could be minutes away or hours. Either way, we're moving fast. Good, Rachel replied, her grip tightening on the controls. We keep going until we're clear. Then we figure out what to do next. Ethan nodded slowly, though his mind was elsewhere. He kept replaying the encounter with the architect in his head, trying to make sense of its words and actions. had promised knowledge and balance, but instead it had taken pieces of them, fragments of their DNA, memories, and very essence, and used them for some unknown purpose. What had it meant by integration? Had it intended to absorb them completely, turning them into part of itself? Or was there another goal, something even more sinister? Lily finally stirred, lifting her head and looking around at the others. Her voice was soft but filled with unease. Do you think it's still out there watching us?" Noah hesitated before answering. "Probably. That thing didn't strike me as the type to give up easily. It wanted something from us, and I doubt this is the end of it." "But we heard it," Ethan said, his tone firm despite the uncertainty gnawing at him. "The shields disrupted its connection. Maybe we weakened it enough to buy ourselves some time. Or maybe we pissed it off," Rachel countered sharply. "If it comes after us again, we might not be so lucky." The comment sent a shiver through the group. None of them wanted to think about what would happen if the architect pursued them, not after seeing how powerful it was. For now, all they could do was focus on escaping and regrouping once they were safely outside the void. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours as the ship continued its frantic retreat. The oppressive darkness outside the view screen began to thin ever so slightly, replaced by faint pinpricks of starlight. It was subtle at first, almost imperceptible, but soon the glow grew stronger, signaling their approach to the edge of the void. Each flicker of light brought a small measure of relief, a reminder that they were leaving the nightmare behind, or at least trying to. When they finally crossed the boundary, the change was immediate. The whispers that had haunted them since entering the void vanished entirely, replaced by the comforting silence of normal space. The stars returned, shining brightly against the blackness, and the ship's instruments stabilized, their erratic behavior giving way to consistent readings. Even the temperature inside the cabin seemed to normalize, banishing the cold chill that had followed them throughout their journey. Rachel let out a long, shaky breath as she eased off the throttle, allowing the ship to drift into a stable orbit, near the edge of the void. "We made it," she said quietly, her voice tinged with disbelief. For now, anyway. Noah leaned back in his chair, closing his eyes briefly as if savoring the moment of calm. "Let's hope it stays that way." Ethan stood and moved to the window, staring out at the vast expanse of stars. The sight should have been beautiful, awe-inspiring even, but all he could feel was a deep sense of unease. The void loomed behind them, its dark presence still visible despite the distance. It felt alive, watching, waiting. He couldn't shake the feeling that they hadn't truly escaped, that the architect was still out there biding its time. "We need to talk about what happens next," Ethan said, turning to face the others. His voice was calm but resolute. "We can't pretend this didn't happen. Whatever the architect took from us, it's changed us, and we don't know what that means yet." Lily nodded, her expression grim. "He's right. We need to figure out what it did to us. Those memories, those feelings, they're still here. It's like parts of it are stuck inside us." Rachel frowned, crossing her arms. "And what about IDC? Do we tell them? Because if we do, they'll shut us down faster than we can blink. Probably lock us up for unauthorized exploration." "And if we don't tell them, then what?" Noah asked pointedly. "We just carry on like nothing happened? Pretend everything's fine while we deal with whatever fallout comes from messing with an ancient cosmic entity?" Ethan sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I don't have all the answers, but I do know one thing. We stick together. Whatever happens next, we face it as a team." The others exchanged wary glances but eventually nodded in agreement. They had already been through too much to turn on each other now. Survival depended on trust and unity. Over the next few hours, they worked to assess the damage to the horizon. The experimental shielding system had saved their lives, but it had also overloaded several key components, leaving the ship vulnerable. Repairs would take time, and they couldn't afford to linger too close to the void. Using the remaining supplies and spare parts, they patched up the worst of the issues, ensuring the ship was functional enough to reach a nearby colony for further repairs. As they worked, the conversation inevitably turned back to the architect and its intentions. Each member of the crew grappled with their own fears and doubts, sharing fragments of their experience in hopes of piecing together a clearer picture. Ethan described the alien memories flooding his mind, visions of civilizations rising and falling, of beings shaped like light and shadow coexisting in harmony. Lily recounted strange biological insights, patterns, and structures that defied conventional science. Noah spoke of equations and theories that rewrote the rules of physics, while Rachel shared flashes of engineering designs that seemed impossibly advanced. "It's like it gave us pieces of itself," Lily said thoughtfully. "But why? What does it want us to do with this knowledge?" "Maybe it doesn't care what we do," Rachel suggested. "Maybe it just wanted to see how we'd react." "Or maybe it's testing us," Ethan added. "Seeing if we're worthy of being part of its design." Noah shook his head, his brow furrowed. "If that's true, then we failed, big time." "Not necessarily," Ethan countered. "We fought back, we resisted. Maybe that's exactly what it wanted, to see if we'd stand our ground." The discussion went in circles, offering no definitive answers. By the time they finished their repairs and charted a course for the nearest settlement, exhaustion had overtaken them. They collapsed into their bunks, physically and emotionally drained, knowing full well that the hardest part of their journey was still ahead. Hours later, as the ship drifted silently through the void of space, Ethan lay awake in his quarters, staring at the ceiling. Sleep eluded him, his mind racing with questions and fears. He couldn't stop thinking about the architect's final words. Balance requires sacrifice. What kind of balance had it been referring to, and what sacrifices would it demand? Next, a sudden noise startled him, a soft clicking sound coming from the corner of the room. He sat up quickly, his heart pounding, only to find nothing there. Just shadows and silence. Shaking his head, he lay back down, telling himself it was just fatigue playing tricks on him. But deep down, he wasn't so sure.